On an impromptu movie night last month, my 22-year-old daughter persuaded me to watch Darren Aronofsky's and Andre Hines' 2010 film Black Swan, with actresses Natalie Portman as Nina, the protagonist, and Mila Kunis as her nemesis Lily. Clearly, this is an adaptation of the story of Swan Lake, so let's look at some of the effects of this adaptation. A static original plot for Swan Lake is hard to pin down. It's widely held that it's a mixture of elements from German and Russian folklore. This fits Calvino's definition 7 of a classic in that it, quote, comes down bearing the traces of previous readings. Swan Lake's original plot centers around a prince called Siegfried. His mother, the queen, wants him to get married, an idea he resents. Later, Siegfried is given a bow and arrow as a gift. Out hunting one night, he spots a swan that he decides to shoot. However, the swan turns out to be a woman, Odette, under the curse of a sorcerer called von Rothbard, a curse which turns her into a swan during the day, but back into a more human-like form at night. Prince Siegfried falls in love with this woman, part of a slew of women under the same curse, to which the sorcerer discreetly objects and schemes. In a subsequent scene, the sorcerer dresses up his own daughter, Odile, to look like Odette, so that when Siegfried declares himself to who he thinks is Odette, it's actually Odile. Odette, of course, considers this a tragedy. Of course, Prince Siegfried sees it as a betrayal of Odette on his own part and apologizes to Odile profusely, unable to recant his vow to the wrong woman. And from there, the ballet descends into a tragic story of self-harm. More on that later. In contrast to the ballet, in the Black Swan film adaptation written by Andre Hines, with screenplay by Darren Aronofsky, these two swans are now two actresses, direct nemeses of each other, rather than one person playing both roles, competing for the one dual role in the ballet. To my eye, Siegfried is no longer a love interest like in fairy tales. To me, he's the clear villain, Thomas Leroy. He's a sexually harassing ballet director from whom Nina, Natalie Portman, is hoping to secure the role of playing Odette, and by extension to play Odile as well, without giving in to his inappropriate advances camouflaged as some form of method acting. So going back to the 1800s again, the hypotext here is not a commercially released literature or film. It's a performance, a dance with this plot or some version of it, generally in 4 acts, but sometimes divided into 2, 3, or 4. As for the adaptation, Pirinen describes how genre descriptions used among people familiar with any given work can be instructive, like the ingredients list on food packaging. The label tells you what's in it, and conversely, what's in it, in terms of literary elements, defines its genre and what readers should expect. A 575 pattern, for example, defines a haiku. In her research into the history behind Aronofsky's development of Black Swan, German language and fairy tales researcher Marguerite Landwehr sees the 2011 release of Black Swan as a postmodern fairy tale, but also as a psychological thriller, putting it effectively in the same categories as films like The Usual Suspects, or perhaps Hitchcock's Psycho or Rear Window, the key elements of which are suspense, sometimes bordering on the macabre. Perhaps Black Swan could be dismissed as a mere ballet film because of the topic. No, I don't think that's right. About the time that Black Swan was released, the 20 knots, another genre called paranormal romance was also happening, with shows and films like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, The Vampire Diaries, and The Moth Diaries, as well as Twilight, whose protagonist is ironically named Bella Swan. And there's plenty that happens in Black Swan that is either hallucination or perhaps paranormal. Closer to my own perception, though, Final Girl Digital sees the film as a coming-of-age story. She discusses how the film aligns with a psychiatric syndrome called the Madonna Whore Syndrome, two extreme antisocial labels that girls growing up carefully navigate to avoid the prudish Madonna's innocence and piety versus the shamed so-called loose woman, the balance being a futile chase for perfection. A common theme in fairy tales is the doppelganger, a look-alike from Dostoevsky's The Double, made into a 2014 film. But then there's the theme of a rivalry within a performing arts group from the 1950 film All About Eve, starring Bette Davis and Anne Baxter. However, these two are themes quite common to fairy tales or any drama. So I couldn't say that these represent missing or silenced elements. So what I will say is this. One of the permeating subplots of the movie is the self-harm rituals of Nina, today called NSSI, non-suicidal self-injury. Lecturer in gender studies Amanda Sandino sees Black Swan as, quote, spanning across multiple genres, unquote, but implicitly being a statement about an inevitable cohabitation of beauty with pain in art, perhaps I think similar to the aesthetic theory behind Japanese kintsugi, the art form of reattaching broken china with gold glue. Should I agree with Sandino, I would say that in Black Swan, the human body is analogous to the broken china, and overcoming injury to be ready for performance is the kintsugi performed, in conjunction with Nina's mother, acting as an impromptu medic for Nina throughout the film. University of Exeter's Victoria Haney names novels Panopticon, A Little Life, and Blade Silver, along with HBO's Sharp Objects and film Girl Interrupted, as other works that feature fictional characters committing acts of NSSI. This is not a feature of the original Swan Lake. This is new. Perhaps for some, this makes Swan Lake part of a canon, not of ballet films, dramas, or fairy tales, but NSSI movies, a new genre for which ballet is only one of a variety of settings in which the topic of NSSI is discussed. In a 2022 dissertation on the topic, Haney describes how the tendency of self-harming to be portrayed as most likely being done by an adolescent white female ignores the presence of the issue in broader society, reinforcing the damsel in distress dynamic that leads people to pity and a search for ways to help in a way that all of humanity may need, perhaps not just adolescent white females. Maybe that's what's missing. This is not to say that Aronofsky has done anything wrong, nor that he should have done anything differently. It's only to say that the issue of NSSI, if not for how objectionable it sounds, would probably be its own genre, if it already isn't, and one that could perhaps benefit from some diversity.